The desert sun was already setting, painting the Las Vegas sky in streaks of orange and purple. Inside his sprawling suite at the International Hotel, Elvis Presley stared out at the twinkling lights of the Strip. It was a familiar sight, one he'd seen countless times. The roar of the crowd, the bright stage lights, the dizzying energy. It was all part of his life now, an endless cycle of performance. He loved it truly, but sometimes deep down, a tiny whisper of weariness crept in. His phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was a special line reserved for one person only, Colonel Tom Parker, his manager. Elvis picked it up, a slight sigh escaping his lips. He knew the Colonel's calls usually meant business, and often business meant change. "Elvis, my boy, got some exciting news for you." Colonel's voice boomed through the receiver, even across the phone lines. It was a voice that could sell ice to an Eskimo or so, Elvis often thought. "Hey, Colonel, what's up?" Elvis tried to sound enthusiastic, but his mind was already trying to guess what new venture Parker had cooked up. The Starlight Grand, Elvis, the biggest, the newest, the most luxurious hotel on the Strip. They want you. The Colonel practically vibrated with excitement. They're offering a residency, a long-term deal. More money than you can shake a stick at. Biggest deal yet, boy. Elvis's eyebrows rose. The Starlight Grand. It was indeed a new player, known for its opulent style and attempts to outdo every other hotel in town. The Starlight Grand. Huh. That's big, Colonel. What's the catch? He'd learned long ago that with the Colonel there was always a catch, or at least a lot of fine print. Catch no catch, my boy. Just a few creative adjustments, Parker chuckled. A dry, raspy sound. They've got some grand ideas for a new direction. A fresh look for the king, really modernizing things, taking you to the next level. A knot began to form in Elvis's stomach. Creative adjustments. He pushed himself away from the window, walking over to the record player. He loved his records, the raw, honest sound of blues, gospel, and rock and roll. It was in his blood, his soul. Oh, you know, a bit of this, a bit of that. Less of the well, less of the old moves. Perhaps more sophisticated musical arrangements. Think grand orchestras. Maybe even some contemporary tunes. Less sweat, more polish. Colonel's words, intended to sound exciting, felt like a cold shower to Elvis. Less of the old moves, less sweat, more polish. That sounded like less of him. His act wasn't just a collection of songs. It was an explosion of energy, a passionate connection with his fans, a dance that came from his very core. It was the hip shake, the curled lip, the spontaneous movements that drove the crowds wild. It was gospel-infused rock and roll that made people feel something deep inside. "Colonel, you know my act, it's who I am," Elvis said, his voice a little quieter now, a hint of steel beneath the surface. "My fans come to see me. They want the music, they love the way I do it. And they'll get it, Elvis. Just an enhanced version, a sophisticated king. Imagine the headlines. Elvis reinvents himself. This is the future. And the money. Oh, the money." Parker was practically salivating. Elvis closed his eyes for a moment. He could hear the adoration in his fans' cheers. He could feel the rhythm of his music pulsing through his veins. He remembered the early days, the struggle to be heard, the fight to play his own kind of music. He'd broken down barriers, started a revolution, and now some hotel wanted to refine him, polish him, like a piece of furniture that needed to fit new decor. "Colonel, I don't know about this," Elvis said, his voice firming up. "My music, my show, it's real, it's honest. It's not something you just redesign." "Nonsense, Elvis. It's business. And this is the biggest business opportunity you'll ever see. We're talking legacy, my boy. A new era for Elvis Presley." Colonel Parker ignored Elvis's concern, steamrolling ahead as always. "They want to meet with us tomorrow first thing in the morning. Be ready, Elvis. This is a game changer." A game changer indeed. But whose game was it changing? Elvis hung up the phone. Slowly, he walked back to the window. the city lights a blur below him. He was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. He had fought hard for his identity, for his music. The thought of someone trying to strip that away to make him into something he wasn't filled him with a cold dread. He knew Colonel Parker would push him, would see only the dollar signs. But Elvis wasn't just a product. He was an artist, and his art, his soul, was not for sale. Not for any price. He just wasn't sure how he was going to make the Colonel understand that a deep sigh escaped him. Tomorrow would be interesting. And he had a feeling it would be much more than just an interesting meeting. He felt a quiet resolve hardening inside him. He would not let them change him. The meeting room at the Starlight Grand was as opulent as the hotel's reputation suggested. Polished marble gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Heavy velvet drapes framed floor to ceiling, windows offering a panoramic view of the bustling Las Vegas Strip. Elvis, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, sat across a vast boardroom table feeling strangely out of place. He preferred the raw energy of a stage, the roar of a crowd, not this hushed businesslike atmosphere. Beside him, Colonel Parker was practically beaming a cigar, puffing gently in his hand. Across from them sat Mr. Harrison Sterling, the hotel's impeccably dressed owner, a man whose smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and Mr. Vincent Henderson, the young, slick entertainment director, who looked like he'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine. "Mr. Presley, Colonel Parker, thank you for coming," Mr. Sterling began, his voice smooth and cultivated. "We are absolutely thrilled at the prospect of having the king himself grace our stage. The Starlight Grand aims for nothing less than the pinnacle of entertainment. And you'll get it, Mr. Sterling. The king is ready to reign," Colonel Parker interjected. "Ever the showman?" Mr. Henderson leaned forward, a confident glint in his eye. "Indeed. And to ensure that we developed a ground-ring vision for Mr. Presley's residency, his legacy. Appeal to a broader, more sophisticated demographic, and truly elevate his artistry to an unprecedented level." Elvis's stomach tightened. "Elevate my artistry?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Precisely." Mr. Henderson gestured to a large presentation board. "We envisions a new Elvis. An Elvis for the modern era. Think less of the, shall we say, unbridled physicality, and more of a refined stage presence. We're considering a more contemporary wardrobe, for elegant suits, classic tuxedos." Elvis's mind flashed to his iconic jumpsuits, custom designed, sparkling under the lights. They were part of his identity, an extension of his stage persona. "My jumpsuits are part of the show," he said, a hint of defiance creeping into his tone. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Mr. Presley, we feel they might be distracting our audience, while certainly appreciative of your existing fan base. Is all being tiffed. We want to project an image of timeless class," Mr. Henderson continued, flicking through slides. "Musically, we're looking at a complete reorchestration of your classic hits. Imagine Hound Dog with a full string section, a soaring choir. We're also curating a selection of nometry." Rock and roll wasn't just a genre to him. It was a revolution, a feeling, a way of life. It was the rhythm that had changed the world. Well, a softer rock, perhaps more melodic. Mr. Henderson clarified, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension in Elvis's posture. "We want to expand your vocal range, showcase your versatility. We even have a brilliant choreographic team ready to introduce a more stylized, less improvisational movement. Vocabulary." His gyrations were what made millions swoon, what made parents gasp in shock, what made teenagers scream with joy. They were raw, untamed passion, the very essence of rock and roll. Colonel Parker, sensing Elvis's rising temperature, quickly intervened. "Fascinating ideas, gentlemen, truly groundbreaking. Mr. Presley is an artist of immense talent, capable of anything. He nudged Elvis under the table, a silent warning. Elvis ignored the nudge. So, you want to take my songs, change my clothes, stop me from moving, and make me sing new songs that aren't even mine? He asked, his voice calm but with an underlying tremor of disbelief and hurt. You want to take Elvis Presley and turn him into who exactly? Mr. Sterling chuckled, a patronizing sound. We want to turn you into the ultimate Vegas icon, Mr. Presley, a legend reimagined. This is about evolution, about securing your place at the very top for decades to come. My place is already at the top, Elvis said quietly, his eyes meeting Mr. Sterling's. And I got there by being myself, by singing my music, my way. Mr. Henderson, still smiling, pressed on. Think of the press, the critical acclaim. We're talking about an entirely new market. This isn't just a show, Mr. Presley. It's an experience. Elvis felt a profound sadness mixed with his anger. They didn't see him as an artist, as a man with a deep connection to his music and his fans. They saw him as a product, a brand to be repackaged and sold. They wanted to strip away his soul, the very essence of what made him Elvis. We understand this is a significant shift, Mr. Sterling concluded, folding his hands on the table. But the financial package we're offering is unparalleled. It's an investment in your future, Mr. Presley, a guaranteed legacy. The chair scraped against the polished floor, a harsh sound in the hushed room. Thank you for your vision, gentlemen, he said, his voice flat. I'll need some time to consider your proposal. He didn't mention the financial package. He didn't care about the money right then, Colonel Parker, ever the opportunist, leaped to his feet. Excellent. We'll be in touch very soon. A truly inspiring meeting. Not to him, and not to his music. He would find another way. He just didn't know what it was yet. Back in his suite, the polished grandeur of the Starlight Grand felt suffocating. Elvis paced, running a hand through his hair. He felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, disappointment, a deep sense of betrayal. He needed to talk to his people, the ones who truly understood him. He picked up the phone and made a series of quick calls. Within the hour, his suite was filled with his closest confidants. Joe Esposito, his loyal road manager, and best friend, Jerry Sheff, his legendary lead guitarist, and T.C. Mahone, his rhythm guitarist, and a steady presence in his life. The sweet inspirations, his amazing backup singers, would join later. All right, boys, Elvis began, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. You're not going to believe what they want. He recounted the meeting, the hotel executive's vision for a modernized Elvis. He described their suggestions, the new costumes, the reorchestrated songs, the focus on sophistication, the explicit mention of less gyrations and less rock and roll. Silence hung heavy in the room as they absorbed his words. Then, like a dam breaking, the outrage erupted. They want to do what? Ronnie Tutt exploded, slamming his hand on the arm of his chair. Take away the jumpsuits. Stop the moves. That's like taking the engine out of a Cadillac. And less rock and roll? James Burton chimed in, shaking his head in disbelief. That's what we do. That's what he does. That's what the fans pay to see. Jerry Sheff leaned forward, his expression serious. Elvis, man, your show isn't just music, it's energy. It's a connection. It's spontaneous. They want to turn you into some kind of museum piece, a polished statue. They called my moves gyrations, Elvis said quietly, his jaw clenched, like I was some kind of freak, like it wasn't part of the music, part of the soul. Joe Esposito, ever the calm voice of reason, but clearly seething, put a hand on Elvis's shoulder. They don't understand, E. They don't get it. They see a performer, a product. They don't see the artist, the man who pours his heart and soul into every single note, every single step. Exactly. T.C. Mahone added, his voice gravelly. Your music comes from the gut. Elvis, it's raw, it's real, it's blues, it's gospel. its country, all rolled into one powerful sound. They want to dilute it, sterilize it. Elvis nodded, feeling a wave of understanding and solidarity from his band. These were the men who stood by him on stage, who understood the magic that happened when they played together. They weren't just musicians, they were his brothers in music. They said it was about elevating my artistry. Elvis scoffed the words, tasting bitter, but it felt more like suffocating it, like they wanted to put me in a box, a shiny, expensive box, but a box nonetheless. It's an insult, Elvis, Ronnie said. To you, to us, to every fan who ever loved a single note you sang. They're trying to erase what made you the king. And what about the fans? James asked. They know your show, they expect that fire, that passion. If you go out there and you're just standing still singing ballads in a tuxedo, they'll feel cheated. They'll feel like they lost their Elvis. That hit Elvis hard. His fans, they were everything to him. He lived for their cheers, their screams, the connection he felt when he poured his heart out on stage. The thought of letting them down, of becoming an unrecognizable, watered-down version of himself, was unbearable. Colonel Parker, he just saw the money, Elvis explained. He's pushing this hard. He thinks it's the greatest deal ever, a new era. Joe shook his head. The Colonel's a businessman. He always has been. He's not an artist. He doesn't understand what this means to you, to us, to the music. Elvis looked around at the faces of his band. These were the men who had shared countless stages, endless road trips, and deep conversations about music. Their passion mirrored his own. So, what do we do? Elvis asked, his voice resolute. I can't do it. I won't. I can't betray my music, my fans, or myself. But the Colonel's already talking contracts. He thinks it's a done deal. We fight it, Elvis, Joe said firmly. We figure out a way. There's always a way. Your music is too important. Your spirit is too vital to let some hotel chain turn you into something you're not. A sense of purpose, cold and clear, settled over Elvis. He felt the fire ignite within him again. Not the performance fire, but the fighter's fire. He wasn't going to let them win. He wasn't going to let them strip away his identity. He had built his career on authenticity, on raw, unadulterated passion, and he would defend that with everything he had. They want to change my act, Elvis said, his voice low but firm. They want to make me something I'm not. Well, they picked the wrong fight. He looked from one face to another, seeing the same determination reflected in their eyes. We're not letting this happen. Not a chance. He didn't know how, but he knew with every fiber of his being that he would find a way to stop it. He just had to be smarter, bolder, and more determined than anyone thought possible. The anger from the meeting slowly began to cool, replaced by a steely resolve. Elvis spent the next few days in deep thought, mostly keeping to himself, much to Colonel Parker's frustration. Parker kept calling, urging him to adorate details, talking about the massive advance and unbelievable prestige. But Elvis just listened, a distant look in his eyes, his mind working furiously. He knew he couldn't just walk away. Breaking a contract with a powerful hotel like the Starlight Grand, especially one negotiated by Colonel Parker, would be a legal nightmare. It would cost a fortune in penalties and could damage his reputation. And the Colonel would never allow it. His entire world revolved around lucrative deals, not artistic integrity. But the alternative, becoming a polished, sin-haunted version of himself, was unthinkable. It felt like a slow death for his spirit, a betrayal of everything he stood for. He wouldn't be able to look himself in the mirror, let alone face his fans. He remembered past contract disputes, smaller ones where money had been the ultimate arbiter. Money talked, it always had, and it hit him. If money was the problem, perhaps money could also be the solution. He started to think about leverage. The Starlight Grand needed him. They were a new hotel looking to make a massive splash, and securing Elvis Presley for a long-term residency was their golden ticket. They'd already invested heavily in the idea of him, in the marketing, in the renovation of their showroom. They weren't just offering him a contract. They were banking their prestige and a significant amount of capital on his presence. What if he could turn their investment against them? A wild, audacious thought began to form in his mind. It was so daring, so outside the box. It almost made him laugh. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the only way he called Joe Esposito to his suite. "Joe," Elvis said, his voice low and serious. "I need some information, deep information, about the Starlight Grand." Joe raised an eyebrow. "What kind of information?" Everything. Their existing contracts, their projected investments. Hill. Their major investors are, I need to know how much they've put into this new Elvis concept. I need to know how much they stand to lose if I don't perform for them. Joe's eyes widened slightly. That's sensitive stuff. Why? Elvis leaned forward, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Because, Joe, I'm not going to let them change my act, but I'm also not going to break the contract. I'm going to make them want to release me from their artistic control. Joe frowned. Processing this, how do you do that? By offering them a deal they can't refuse, Elvis said, a determined glint in his eye. A deal that makes it more profitable for them to let me be Elvis my way, or even to let me walk, than to force me into their mold. You're talking about buying out their vision? Joe asked, clearly intrigued now. More than that, Elvis replied. I'm talking about buying out their right to dictate my performance, their investment in their version of Elvis, their expectations. I want to buy out their contracts on me. Joe whistled softly. That's a bold move. That's a lot of money. My music, my integrity, my connection with my fans. That's priceless. Colonel Parker only sees the money going in. I'm thinking about the money that needs to go out to protect what's most important. This is going to make the Colonel's head spin, Joe mused, a smirk playing on his lips. He'll spin all right, Elvis agreed. But he'll also see the potential. This isn't just about getting out of a bad deal. It's about making an unprecedented statement. It's about showing everyone that you can't put a price on authenticity. And it's about winning, Joe. Winning on our terms. How do we get this kind of information? We can't exactly walk in and ask them for their balance sheets. No, Elvis said, a plan all ready for me. But there are ways discreetly, through lawyers who aren't tied to the Colonel private investigators, if we have to people who can dig deep without raising alarms. He started outlining his thoughts, the steps they'd need to take. He knew it would be complicated, expensive, and require absolute secrecy. Joe listened, his initial surprise giving way to admiration. This wasn't just a simple artist fighting for his art. This was a strategic mastermind, planning a corporate counterattack. All right, Joe said, a new energy in his voice. Consider it done. We'll get you every piece of information you need, and we'll keep it under wraps. The Colonel won't know a thing until you're ready. Elvis felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just a wild idea anymore. It was a concrete plan taking shape. He wasn't going to be a victim. He was going to take control. He was going to remind everyone, especially the Starlight Grand, who the king truly was. The days that followed were a blur of hushed phone calls, late-night meetings, and encrypted messages. While Colonel Parker continued to press the Starlight Grand for contract finalization, completely unaware of Elvis's true intentions, Elvis and Joe Esposito launched their secret operation. He reached out to a trusted, independent legal firm in Los Angeles, one with no prior ties to Colonel Parker or any of Elvis's existing business entities. This law firm, known for its corporate intelligence work, was given a specific, seemingly vague task. Gather comprehensive financial data on the Starlight Grand Hotel, with a particular focus on their projected investment in their new entertainment division. We need to know what they've poured into their Elvis Reimagined project. Elvis instructed over a secure line. Marketing, costume designs, musical arrangements, stage renovations, projected advertising campaigns. Ev budgeted for this specific vision, and we need to know their overall financial leverage, their debts, their long-term growth strategies. The lawyers, initially intrigued by the high-profile client and the unusual request, began their meticulous work. They deployed financial analysts, discreetly accessed public records, and even utilized private investigators for more sensitive inquiries. It was a complex web, but they were skilled at untangling it. Meanwhile, the executives at the Starlight Grand, Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson, were brimming with confidence. They saw Elvis's quiet period as capitulation. They believed they had the king cornered, that the sheer scale of their offer and the colonel's relentless pressure would eventually win him over. They continued to move forward with their plans. Mock-ups of sleek, minist suits were drawn up. Musical arrangers began work on sophisticated versions of classic rock and roll tunes. Choreographers discussed controlled, elegant movements. They were investing heavily, convinced their vision was a guaranteed success. "He'll come around," Mr. Sterling had told Mr. Henderson over lunch. "No one walks away from a deal this big. It's simply too lucrative. He's just taking his time to process the sheer genius of our concept," Mr. Henderson added, puffing out his chest. "He'll realize this is the best thing for his career." They were so focused on their own narrative, they completely missed the subtle currents of defiance emanating from Elvis's camp. Elvis, on his part, kept up appearances. He attended a few social events, posed for photos, and occasionally met with Colonel Parker, offering non-committal responses when pressed about the Starlight Grand deal. He'd practice his music, feeling the raw power of his voice, the thrill of his guitar. He knew what he was capable of, and it wasn't some sonim-pited version of himself. Days turned into a week, then two. The pressure from Parker intensified. "Elvis, they're ready to sign. We need to move on this. They're getting impatient." "Tell them I'm still contemplating," Elvis would reply, a faint smile playing on his lips. He was waiting for the data, for the solid ground upon which to launch his counterstrike. Finally, a thick dossier arrived at his suite, delivered by a trusted courier. It was compiled by the legal team, filled with financial statements, market analyses, and projected losses. Elvis and Joe spent an entire night poring over it. The numbers were staggering. The Starlight Grand had already poured millions into their new Elvis concept. They had renegotiated advertising slots, committed to specific stage designs, and even laid off some existing entertainment staff in anticipation of their grand rebranding. Their financial projections were heavily reliant on the new Elvis being a massive long-term success. If the project failed or if Elvis walked, their losses would be monumental, not just in money but in reputation. Elvis's eyes scanned the figures, a triumphant gleam in them. He saw their vulnerability, their overconfidence. Their groundbreaking vision was also their biggest financial Achilles heel. "Joe," Elvis said finally, looking up from the documents, a deep satisfaction in his voice. "This is it. This is everything we need. They haven't just invested in a show, they bet their reputation on controlling me. And now we're going to call their bluff." Joe Esposito looked at the massive stacks of papers, then at Elvis. "So the plan is still the buyout?" Elvis leaned back in his chair, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. "Oh, it's more than a buyout, Joe. It's a liberation, and it's going to shock them to their core." The pieces were in place. The stage was set. The king was about to make his move, and it would be a performance unlike any other. The day Elvis decided to unleash his plan on Colonel Parker, the air in the suite was thick with unspoken tension. Parker arrived, bustling with impatience, ready to deliver another lecture about the urgency of signing the Starlight Grand contract. He carried a fresh stack of papers, undoubtedly the final drafts. "Elvis, my boy, this dithering has gone on long enough," Parker began before even settling into a chair. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson are losing patience. We're leaving millions on the table here. This is the biggest deal of your career." Elvis held up a hand, silencing the Colonel. "Colonel, sit down. We need to talk not about signing their contract, but about a different kind of deal." Parker blinked, taken aback by Elvis's unusually firm demeanor. He sat, though his eyes remained wary. "A different deal? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the Starlight Grand," Elvis began, his voice calm and steady, "and their vision for my act." "Ah, yes. Brilliant. Isn't it a new Elvis? A sophisticated king. It's going to be revolutionary." Parker puffed his chest out. "It's not for me, Colonel," Elvis stated plainly. "I won't do it. I won't change my music, my moves, or my identity for anyone. Not for any amount of money." Parker's face darkened. "Nonsense, Elvis. You're contractually obligated to negotiate in good faith. This is business. You can't just—" "I'm not breaking the contract," Colonel Elvis interrupted, holding up a hand again. "That's where you're wrong. I have no intention of breaking it. In fact, I'm going to fulfill it, but I'm going to do it on my terms." He pushed a thick folder across the table. It was the detailed financial analysis Joe and the lawyers had compiled. "I've had my people doing some research, Colonel. Deep research on the Starlight Grand's investment in this new Elvis project." Parker eyed the folder suspiciously. "Research? What kind of research? What in tarnation are you talking about?" "They've invested heavily, Colonel. Millions in new stage designs, marketing campaigns, and even in a proposed new wardrobe and musical arrangements. They've bet their future on this reimagined Elvis." Elvis paused, letting the information sink in. Parker was listening now, his usual bluster replaced by a flicker of curiosity, and then, slowly, a dawning comprehension of the word millions. "My plan," Elvis continued, "is not to walk away from the Starlight Grand. My plan is to pay them to buy out their entire investment in this new Elvis concept, effectively freeing me from their artistic control over my performance there." Colonel Parker stared at him, speechless for a moment. Then his face twisted in a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and finally outrage. "You want to pay them? Are you crazy, boy? We're supposed to be getting paid. They want to pay us millions, and you want to give it back to them. And more. What in the Sam Hill are you thinking? That's utterly insane. We don't pay them. They pay us." "No, Colonel, it's not insane," Elvis said, leaning forward, his voice radiating conviction. "It's strategic. They want a new Elvis. I want to be the Elvis. I'm going to buy out that vision, every penny they've sunk into it, plus a premium for their trouble and for their agreement to let me perform my act my way, for the duration of the contract, or even to release me from the artistic restrictions entirely." Parker slammed his fist on the table. "But the money, Elvis, the sheer cost. You'll be throwing away a fortune. My commission alone. This is financial madness." "My artistic integrity, Colonel, is worth more than any sum of money," Elvis said, his voice quiet but firm. "And it's not madness, it's an investment. An investment in my legacy, an investment in my fans, an investment in me." He watched Parker's face. The Colonel's initial fury was slowly giving way to something else. The calculating glint of a shrewd businessman. He was a master of the deal. And Elvis had just presented him with an unprecedented, unbelievably complex, and potentially incredibly profitable power play. "Think about it, Colonel," Elvis pressed. "They want to control me. I'm taking that control back, and I'm doing it by using their own rules. Money? This isn't just buying out a contract. It's sending a message to the Starlight Grand, to every rather co-negative who thinks they can change an artist. You can't buy my soul." Parker paced, muttering to himself, running numbers in his head. The optics, the precedent, the sheer audacity. It's a gamble, Elvis, a a colossal one. "It's a gamble I'm willing to take," Colonel Elvis stated, unwavering. "And I need you to make it happen. You're the best at this. You can negotiate the terms. I just need you to understand. My act stays as it is, or there is no act. And if we have to pay them to ensure that, then that's what we'll do." Parker stopped, looking at Elvis, truly seeing the determination in his eyes. He saw not just a performer, but a man who knew his worth and was ready to fight for it with every resource he had. He knew then that Elvis was unmovable. And if he couldn't move him, he might as well profit from the direction Elvis was taking. A slow, calculating smile spread across the colonel's face. "Well, Elvis," he said, a glint in his eye, "this is certainly unconventional. But if anyone can pull off an unconventional deal, it's the king and his manager." He picked up the financial dossier. "All right, my boy, let's see how much these fancy hotel men really want to control the king." The game had just changed, and Colonel Parker, despite his initial shock, was already planning his next move. The meeting at the Starlight Grand was scheduled for the following afternoon. This time, Elvis arrived with Colonel Parker and, notably, a new face. A distinguished, no-nonsense lawyer from the firm, Elvis had discreetly hired Mr. Alan Finch. Finch was renowned for his sharp legal mind and his ability to navigate complex corporate negotiations. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson greeted them with strained smiles. They clearly anticipated a heated discussion, perhaps a plea from Elvis for more creative freedom, or a demand for an even larger sum of money. They were prepared to stand firm. "Gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to this. Follow up," Mr. Sterling began, trying to maintain an air of control. "We understand Mr. Presley has some reservations. We are prepared to discuss minor adjustments, but our overall vision for the new Elvis remains paramount." "Actually, Mr. Sterling," Elvis cut in smoothly, his voice calm and resonant, "we're not here to discuss adjustments. We're here to discuss a different kind of arrangement entirely." Colonel Parker stepped forward, a surprising gleam in his eye, embracing the unusual nature of the situation. "Indeed, my client, Mr. Presley, has a proposition for you, gentlemen. One that is, shall we say, unique." Mr. Henderson frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Proposition? We believe our offer is already more than generous, Colonel. It's not about the money we receive from you," Elvis interjected, looking directly at Mr. Sterling. "It's about the money I'm prepared to offer you." A stunned silence fell over the room. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson exchanged bewildered glances. Then Mr. Finch, the lawyer, stepped forward. His voice was precise, authoritative. "Gentlemen, my client, Mr. Elvis Presley, is prepared to make a substantial offer to the Starlight Grand Hotel. He wishes to purchase outright your full financial investment in the proposed Elvis reimagined show." "Purchase our investment? What does that even mean? Are you suggesting we simply cancel the show?" "No," Mr. Finch clarified, remaining perfectly calm. "Furthermore, he's prepared to pay a significant premium on top of that figure as a buyout for your rights to dictate the artistic direction of his performances under any existing or future contract." Mr. Sterling's face had gone pale. You want to buy out our creative control?" "Precisely," Elvis confirmed, his voice unwavering. "I will fulfill my contractual obligation to perform here at the Starlight Grand, but I will do it my band, my moves, my jumpsuits. The Elvis Presley my fans know and love. Cry or Tess, this is outrageous, unprecedented. We have a signed intent, a clear vision. You can't just..." "We can," Elvis said, his gaze firm. "My legal team has thoroughly reviewed our options. We are not breaking any agreements. We are simply offering to purchase your perceived investment and control over my artistic output. We have a detailed breakdown of your projected costs, which Mr. Finch will present." Mr. Finch slid a much thinner but equally a folder across the table. It contained a summary of the financial intelligence Elvis had gathered. The hotel executives who thought they held all the cards suddenly saw their own meticulous planning used as leverage against them. Mr. Sterling picked up the document, his eyes scanning the figures. He saw line after line of their internal projections. Costs, he knew, were accurate. The amount Elvis was offering was not just the sum of their expenses. It was a substantial profit, a way for them to recoup their entire investment, and then some, without ever having to risk a single performance of their untested new Elvis concept. The hotel, who had confidently planned to mold the king, now faced a choice: either accept the guaranteed substantial payout and admit defeat in their artistic control, or fight a legal battle against one of the world's most powerful artists, who was clearly willing to spend whatever it took to protect his integrity. "This is highly irregular," Mr. Sterling finally managed, his voice strained. "Perhaps," Elvis agreed, a subtle smile touching his lips. "But it's also a solution. You get your money back with interest, and you don't have to deal with an unhappy artist who refuses to compromise his art. And I get to be Elvis Presley. My way." Mr. Henderson looked at Sterling, then back at Elvis. A dawning realization. In his eyes, Elvis wasn't bluffing. He was prepared to pay them a king's ransom to simply be himself. "We will need time to consider this," Mr. Sterling said, gathering what little composure he had left. His voice lacked its former confidence. "Of course," Elvis said, rising from his seat. "But my offer stands for a limited time. Artistic freedom, gentlemen, is a priceless commodity, and I'm prepared to pay the price." He turned and walked out, Colonel Parker trailing behind, a look of grudging admiration and thinly veiled excitement on his face. The hotel executives were left in stunned silence, the sound of their grand plans crashing around them. The news, as it always does in Las Vegas, started to leak. Not the full intricate details of Elvis's audacious buyout offer, but enough to create a significant buzz. Whispers spread through the city's entertainment circles. Something unusual was happening between Elvis Presley and the new Starlight Grand Hotel. There were unprecedented negotiations, artistic differences, and rumors of a massive financial dispute. The media, always hungry for a story involving the king, jumped on it. Tabloids ran speculative headlines. "Elvis quits Vegas. King refuses Starlight Grand's demands. Is Elvis's career in crisis?" Fans, meanwhile, were both concerned and curious. They adored Elvis's raw energy and iconic style. The idea of him changing his act was a hot topic of debate on fan forums, and in everyday conversations during this period, Elvis made a strategic move. He kept a low profile regarding the Starlight Grand, letting the rumors simmer, but he didn't disappear. Instead, he organized a few impromptu, intimate performances at smaller, less formal venues in town. Maybe a gospel session at a local church, or an unannounced appearance at a small club where his musicians could simply jam. He wanted to remind the public, and implicitly the Starlight Grand, what his music was truly about. These performances were electrifying. Without the pressure of a grand stage or corporate expectations, Elvis sang with an even deeper passion. He danced, he sweated, he poured his soul into every note, just as he always had. The crowds were ecstatic, roaring their approval. Word quickly spread that Elvis was still Elvis. He hadn't changed. Despite the rumors, this sent a clear message. The magic was still there, untamed and vibrant, back at the Starlight Grand. The atmosphere was fraught. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson were locked in intense, often heated discussions with their board of directors and financial advisors. The offer from Elvis was a staggering sum, but accepting it meant admitting they had overreached. It meant their grand vision of reimagining the king had failed spectacularly. "It's a humiliating defeat, Harrison," one board member fumed. "We spent millions on this concept, and now we're letting him pay us to not use it. It makes us look foolish." "Consider the alternative, Robert," Mr. Sterling argued, rubbing his temples. "If he refuses to perform as we wish, and we try to force him, we risk a protracted legal battle that would be a public relations nightmare. And if he walks, we lose our investment and our star attraction. We'd have an empty showroom, a massive financial hole, and a public that sees us as the hotel that tried to silence the king. Mr. Henderson, usually so confident, was uncharacteristically subdued. His offer guarantees we recoup our investment plus a significant profit margin. It's a clean break financially. While it's not the prestige we envisioned, it prevents a catastrophic loss. Some argued for holding the line, believing Elvis would eventually cave. Others, seeing the financial prudence of his offer and the rising tide of public support for Elvis being Elvis, urged acceptance. They knew the public would side with the artist who stayed true to himself, not the corporation trying to change him. The impromptu performances Elvis was doing only solidified this public sentiment. He's showing them he doesn't need their stage to be the king, Joe Esposito told Elvis after one such session. He's proving that his power comes from his music, not from their chandeliers. Elvis nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't just about money. It was about principle. It was about proving that art couldn't be bought and sold like a commodity. The clock was ticking on Elvis's offer. He had given them a deadline. The tension inside the Starlight Grand reached a fever pitch. On the final day, after hours of shouting and frantic calculations, a decision was finally made. It was a bitter pill to swallow for Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson, but ultimately the numbers and the very real threat of public backlash and legal quagmire spoke louder than their pride. The phone rang in Elvis's suite. It was Colonel Parker, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, yet with an unmistakable note of triumph. "Elvis, my boy, they folded. They've accepted your terms." Elvis closed his eyes, a wave of profound relief washing over him. He had done it. He had fought for his art, for his identity, and he had won. The king would remain the king on his own terms. The official announcement from the Starlight Grand was carefully worded, a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy, attempting to save face. It spoke of a mutually beneficial agreement, and Mr. Presley's unparalleled artistic vision, confirming that Elvis Presley would indeed take the stage at their hotel. What it didn't say was that Elvis had paid a colossal sum to effectively buy out their artistic control and ensure he could perform his act his way. The public didn't need the precise details. The underlying message was clear. Elvis had stood his ground. He hadn't been changed. The king was still the king. The news sent a ripple of excitement through his fan base and the music industry. It was a victory for artistic integrity, a powerful statement against corporate attempts to dictate creative expression. Colonel Parker, despite his initial shock and concerns about the financial outlay, he spun it as a bold, unprecedented business move by Elvis coating his power and control. He even managed to secure additional, more artist-friendly terms for future engagements, capitalizing on the hotel's desperation to minimize negative press. The night of Elvis's first show back at the Starlight Grand was electric. The newly renovated showroom, intended to showcase a reimagined Elvis, was now simply the backdrop for the real Elvis. The marquee outside still blazed his name, but now it felt different. Imbued with a fresh sense of triumph, the air inside the theater crackled with anticipation. Crowd, a mix of loyal fans and curious onlookers, roared as the lights dimmed. The familiar opening chords of his band hit powerful and unmistakable. Then there he was, Elvis, not in a sleek conservative suit, but in a dazzling custom-designed white jumpsuit, encrusted with shimmering jewels. A cape flowing behind him. The sight of him, unchanged, authentic, brought a collective gasp, then a wave of thunderous applause and screams. He stood center stage, a mic in his hand, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. His eyes scanned the crowd. Taking it all in, he felt a surge of raw energy, a profound sense of liberation. He hadn't just bought out contracts. He had bought back his artistic soul. He launched into his first song, a classic rocker, with a ferocity and passion that seemed even more intense than usual. His voice filled the room, rich and powerful. He moved across the stage, hips swaying, legs kicking, hair flying. Every movement was fluid, unrehearsed. Pure Elvis. Crowd erupted, feeding off his energy, screaming his name. The band was tighter than ever, their joy evident in their playing. James Burton's guitar solos soared. Ronnie Tutt's drums provided an unyielding beat. Jerry Chef's bass lines were soulful and precise. The sweet inspirations harmonized perfectly, their voices weaving around Elvis's, adding layers of gospel-infused magic. Elvis sang Hound Dog with every ounce of raw, unpolished energy it deserved, making eye contact with every screaming fan. He performed Suspicious Minds with dramatic flair, his powerful vocals resonating through the theater. He threw scarves into the adoring crowd, his smile genuine, his eyes twinkling. He was home, he was free. During a break between songs, bathed in the spotlight, Elvis looked out at the sea of faces, his fans. He thought of the meeting where they tried to change him, of the millions he'd spent to reclaim himself. It was worth every single penny. More than money, it was about standing up for what was right. "Thank you," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for always being the greatest fans in the world, and thank you for letting me just be me." The roar of the crowd was deafening. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. Elvis had not just won a negotiation. He had won a battle for his identity. He had shown the world that true artistry couldn't be confined, couldn't be bought, and certainly couldn't be changed. He had reclaimed his stage, his music, and his soul. The king was back, and he was more himself than ever. The Starlight Grand experience became a landmark moment in Elvis Presley's career, though not in the way the hotel executives had initially envisioned. It was more than just a successful residency. It was a testament to his unwavering commitment to his art and his authenticity. The story whispered, and then openly celebrated, of Elvis buying out the hotel's attempt to change him only solidified his legend. He wasn't just a performer. He was an icon who valued his integrity above all else. The hotel, despite the financial pay-up they received, endured a subtle but lasting reputation as the place that tried to tame the king. While they continued to operate, their attempts to dictate artistic vision became a cautionary tale in the entertainment industry. Other venues learned a valuable lesson. You invite an artist like Elvis Presley for who they are, not for who you wish them to be. For Elvis, the experience was profoundly liberating. The weight of potential artistic compromise had been lifted. He continued to perform his music, his way, with even greater passion and freedom. His shows were electric. Each performance a joyous celebration of rock and roll, gospel, and the unique blend of styles that defined him. He was able to experiment within his own boundaries, introducing new songs that felt right to him, connecting with his audience on an even deeper, more personal level. His loyalty to his band and backup singers deepened immeasurably. They had stood by him, outraged on his behalf, and shared in his victory. The camaraderie on stage, always strong, now radiated an even more powerful bond. They were a family united by their shared love for the music and their respect for Elvis's artistic courage. The heartwarming core of the story wasn't just about Elvis's financial power, but about his deep-seated belief in himself and his connection to his roots. He could have become the polished version they wanted, but that wasn't Elvis. His music was raw, honest, and filled with emotion. To strip that away would have been to strip away a part of himself, a part of what made him extraordinary. He often spoke about the incident in later years, albeit vaguely in interviews, referring to it as a time he had to fight for the soul of the music. His fans understood. They saw in him not just a superstar, but a man who guarded his true self, fiercely inspiring them to do the same in their own lives. His refusal to be molded, his defiance in the face of commercial pressure, made him even more beloved, solidifying his unique place in history. The enduring power of his original act, the iconic jumpsuits, the uninhibited moves, the soulful voice, all remained intact. He proved that authenticity triumphs over artificiality every single time. He showed that you don't need to change to stay relevant. You just need to stay true to who you are. Years later, Elvis still remembered the feeling of that first show back at the Starlight Grand. The roar of the crowd, the freedom in his voice. He had faced down a challenge that threatened to change him fundamentally, and he had emerged victorious, stronger and more certain of his path. On stage, bathed in the bright lights, the roar of the crowd washing over him, Elvis Presley would close his eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm pulsing through his veins. His heart beat strong, not just with the excitement of performance, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had preserved his true self. He was Elvis the King, unchanged, unforgettable, and undeniably free. And that, he knew, was the greatest legacy of all.